Okay.
Wow.
Perek Hamishi, Pirke Avoth. We are in 5th Perek, Mishnah Vav. We started it. I think that we are still there. The 10 creations that happened Erev Shabbat Ben Hashem. That means they were the very last items on the list of creation. The very last items. And we went through the list. So we were doing Rambam says that the point is that the world at large believed that the word I'm about to use means a different thing right now. The world believed that creationism is against science. Meaning what? Meaning that everything they knew about science, everything they had understood about how this world and matter works, pointed to, and their philosophy pointed to the idea of Olam Kadmon. That the world, it doesn't change. It never came into existence. It never came into existence. It always was and always will be. Aristotle says if there is a God, it's the world itself. The world has no beginning, no end. It cannot change. All the change that we are seeing is just the pattern of the cycles that are happening. But for it to come into existence at a certain point, Aristotle was very much against that. Aristotle had an argument with his teacher, who was Aristotle's teacher? Plato, no, not. They say it goes back to Shalom Amelech, that academy, Atuna, the Athens Academy, which they were members of. But that's a side thing. He was a student of Plato, and they had this raging argument whether the world always was or the world came into being at a certain point. Now, as history has it, Plato's idea was rejected for many, many centuries. They laughed at him till after the Renaissance with Newton and all other things. He was proven right, Plato. But Aristotle won the day, at least for during his time. History hasn't remained the same. But Kuzari writes, for example, that what Aristotle believed about creation is absolute kefira. Absolute kefira. But Plato was right. Now, it's not saying that Plato believed in Hashem. Plato didn't. But Plato, basically, what he says, he didn't use those words because they didn't exist. He says, like the scientific community nowadays talks about Big Bang. The world burst into existence at a certain point in time. So that's what Plato said. Plato said the world came about. And that idea, which I'm calling creationism now, and it's not a correct word anymore because creationism is versus Big Bang now. But that means an idea that something is nitchadesh, something is created, that Plato championed, and he lost. And at the time, everybody who was anybody except Jews ridiculed Plato. Because he writes in his sefer, no, Plato is right. Plato is right, and as I said, by Renaissance it was clear already that the scientific research has shown the way that no, we have evidence that the world burst into existence at a certain point. And this is what Rambam is referring to over here, that the world outside of Chachamim, outside of the Jews, the world does not believe in a creation. That means they didn't even believe in Big Bang. Question over here is not only whether there is a creator or not. They believe in Olam Kadmon. The world exists unto itself. He always was, he always will be. So, Bechol et. So now he says, but however, Chachamim do explain to us. Chachamim do explain to us that Hashem does not change His will as far as running the world. Hashem has set a system into place, and that system works. That system works. It doesn't override the system. The system is not overridden. Whether it's something that happens on a regular basis, that means, okay, we are holding by spring. We're going to see the trees flowering and budding and all that, and that's something that we expect. It happens every cycle, every season. So not only such a thing Hashem put into a system, even something that does not happen on a regular basis, which what we call, Rambam says, what we call a miracle, even that Hashem put into the system. He's not overriding the system itself. So that's, if you remember last time I said, so therefore not only is it not a question, but it's expected that miracles could be explained. That if you find a scientific formula or a scientific condition to replicate a certain miracle, that's not a question whatsoever for us. Not only is not a question, it's to be expected. Because that is also within the system. It's not the system overridden. So therefore, that's what this Mishnah means, that one of the last things in creation, on the Yom Shishi, 6th day of creation, there was the example that Rambam gives is the earthquake which split the surface of the earth, and Korach and his followers fell in, were swallowed, to use the terms of the pasuk. So that is already part of the plan, not only the plan, the system of the teva, the nature of the world, that such things do happen. There is a natural cause, and if somebody comes and tells us, you know what, I was able to somehow, we are able to see the indications and the symptoms, and we could replicate the change, the shifts in the tectonic plates, etc. And that's what happened. Really, it wasn't God, right? So it's not a question. It's not any contradiction whatsoever. That's how it happened. We do know that that's what it happened, and it was a natural thing. And even more, what is for us much more strange thing, be'er, you have a rock that just gives off water. If we at one point will come up with the know-how to either to be able to replicate it, or before that I'm sure we will come with the know-how to have a theory how it could happen, what would be the right conditions for a rock to produce water. So that's also put into the system, and for a donkey to be able to speak.
How is that possible? I thought that's reserved for human beings.
That is reserved for human beings, because it's the power of neshama. Right. So that means there is a system, there is a level of speech that works without a neshama. I mean, it has to be a different speech. We explained that we need our speech because of our imagination, right? Truth of the matter is, anything that has to do with experience, we could communicate like other creatures do communicate. We don't need our speech for what has to do with our experience. We need our speech for our imagination. Anything that is in our environment, we could point to it. We could come and, my son doesn't speak yet, so he's thirsty, he brings me a cup. Right, so I get it. It's a communication. It's a communication. And lahavdil, I shouldn't compare a human to a non-human, but I'm sure there would be some other creatures who would do the same thing. You may have a pet who's thirsty and would come and lead you to where the hose is. So for communication, you only need speech for what has to do with our imagination. Remember, we said that Kuzay says the difference between experience and imaginations. Animals have wisdom as far as it goes with experience, but they cannot imagine anything. Cannot imagine. An animal is never going to imagine something they didn't have. I may say, this chair is a little bit uncomfortable, so how would I start thinking, how would I make it more comfortable? I'll come up with an invention, a chair that has never been made yet.
How does a bird make a nest?
It has to, those are instinct.
It's not
Those are
imagination.
instinct.
I want a big one, small one.
It's all instinct. They do it the way they do it. They never make it any bigger or whatever.
I understand, like a cat, covers the waist. That's instinct. But
That's
building
also instinct.
something
That's also
needs
instinct.
imagination, no?
It's also instinct. Right? They did some in National Geographic. I was reading. They did some research, some studies with turtles. Right? They put food where they couldn't reach. So there's nothing you're gonna do. Then they started to train them to move, with their head, to move things around in their thing. They never did it on their own. But once you train them to move, here is your water bowl, you could move it. And if you could move it, you could climb on it. Right? So once they train them, they use that to get to food. But they have certain things, certain experiences. Once, right? Like I think Kuzari gives this. It says if an animal is hit with a stick, from now on, and some of them you'll be amazed how quickly they respond. As soon as they see a person with a stick, they get very timid. They back down. But if they never saw such a thing, they never experienced it, they won't be able to imagine, that stick could be hurtful. Whereas a human will immediately see the danger in the weapon that the person is holding. That could hurt much more. But that will be. There is a. I read this also in National Geographic. There is a society of chimpanzees that live on a certain island off of Africa. Right, so they've been isolated from other chimpanzees, and they have a certain things that is not found by any other chimpanzees. Chimpanzees like to eat ant or any meat they get their hand up. They like protein. So all chimpanzees all around the world, they put sticks inside ant mounds, so ants go on them, and they lick it. These chimpanzees before they put the stick in their mouth and they shred it. So now they have a little bit broom-like stick, right? And one end is a little bit broom-like. They put that in, you get much more ants because you have. But it's only in that island. None of the other ones ever figured it out. So somehow they were shown the method. Once the method was shown, they don't know how it started. But once the method is shown, okay, they got it. But none of the other ones ever thought of it. Right? It works very well. It makes life much easier to keep in mind.
So is that instinct or is that something they learned then?
They learned, but that's experience. It's not imagination.
Oh.
They wouldn't figure it out on their own the way Kuzari explains it. The way Kuzari explains it. So I'm just saying, now you keep that in mind. So now you understand the power of speech. Anything that has to do with my experience, says Kuzari, with experience, they understand. They have that much chokhmah, if you will. But imagination, they don't have. So they could be quite smart, but they don't have imagination. So now let's follow that line of reasoning. He doesn't say that, but that is why we need the power of speech. Anything with my experience, I could point to it, I could take you to it. But if I have an imagination in my mind, how to build an airplane, it's very, very difficult, unless I draw it, but it's very, very difficult for me to communicate now. So because we have imagination, we need power of speech. That works hand in hand, it seems. Now, I'm just wondering, the speech that the donkey had, he still didn't have imagination, right? He just said, "Hey, why do you hit me? Why do you hit me? I saw a malach." There's no imagination involved. So what was the point of that speech? Just the fact that he could communicate on that level. So does that come from neshama? That's your question. I really don't know.
It's like a parrot speech.
Was it like a parrot speech? That's a very good point. That's a very good point. Was it like a parrot? Maybe.
Well, the parrots don't talk, right? They just utter sounds that sound like speech.
Well,
They don't understand what they're saying.
that's right.
Do
From
they
the
understand what
content-
they're saying?
But the donkey understood what he said.
Rabbi, from the content of the
Ask
Content.
why
speech,
are you hating me?
They
of the
mimic
donkey,
one.
I
Like
think we
maybe
should
just
look at the content and
God
see if
taught
it's
him to
imagination
just
or
write
if
the
it's...
No, he says, "Why do you hit me three
Experience.
times? Why do you hit me three times? I've been your donkey. I've never. Do you know me to be? Do you know me to be subservient, or do you know me to be rebellious?" That's basically what he asked.
It has imagination in it.
Does I don't know. Why do you say that?
I mean, it's talking about logic.
Logic, yeah, logic there is. They could have logic, but imagination is above that.
What are we saying? That the donkeys have inherent ability to really think?
That's what Rambam says. Rambam says he was. That's what Mishnah means. Mishnah says that Ben Hashemashot was Pi Ha'aton. Pi Ha'aton was created already in the 60s. Well, that donkey wasn't there then. What does it mean he was created? That means Hashem put within the nature that he wasn't going to override the nature come the time of Bilam. He put within the nature a system, a plan, a route that works. Again, like a computer program. You have the program that works regularly, but you put it from beforehand, you put in, let's say, a safe mode. If such a thing happens, the computer goes on safe mode. Now, that doesn't happen all the time. It only happens maybe once in 3 months. But it's not something new in the computer. It's a system that always was there. That's what Rambam is saying. It's a system that is within the creation of the natural order of the things. Even though it's not the regular pattern of how things work. It came about at a certain time for a certain need. It was triggered. So, I don't know how the power of speech works. Right? Yes.
به فارسی میگم که بتونم موضوع من برسونم. میگم این 10 تا چیزی که بین شما شد آفریده شد، پس بنابراین هشم میدونه که همچه اتفاقاتی میفته و اگرم نمیافتاد، مثلا فرض کنیم ما خوب بودیم فلان بودیم، پس اونها که ساخته چی میشد؟
There's not a problem. Again, it's like a computer. You make a computer, and the computer has a system. If there is a surge of electricity that could burn the engine, right? They have a system. Let's say prior it reaches the engine that shuts it down. So you're telling me if the surge never happened and it never shut down, is that system redundant? Okay, so the system wasn't used. I don't know if that's such a big question. So استفاده نمیشد. خداوند در آفرینش گذاشته که از هم چیزی نیاز بشه استفاده بشه. الان استفاده نمیشه. سوال چیه؟ نمیشه.
ولی کامپیوتر هست.
But I found they just caught somebody with a donkey on Indonesia.
What happened?
He was with a donkey.
Oh.
Rabbi, but Hashem knows exactly. Hashem sees the future.
Okay, that's a different question.
Sorry.
Right. You want to ask me the
I'm not
famous
asking
question?
you. I'm trying to respond to this.
Yeah.
He knows that it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
But that was his choice to be.
Okay, we shall continue with Hashem.
خواستم